Starting the
There it is. Okay.
for those of you who just joined us, if you want to put your name beside your name, add your state, the two-letter um, abbreviation for your state by your name. If you're unable to do that, just put it in chat and Deborah and I will add that. We always like to know who's in the room, and it also provides an opportunity for everybody else to look around and see who's in the room as well. So you do that, we'd appreciate it. Welcome on this, from Michigan at least, it's a sunshiny November 12th day, and always glad to see the sun, although it is a little chilly outside, and always glad to see the faces and the names of people here at 360. So our first question today, which I will put in chat also, is how do you gather those stories of success? And do you use the stories to encourage your volunteers? So again, the topic is success stories, welcoming new volunteers and engaging all on the team. So what examples do we have in the room of using those stories of success and using them to encourage volunteers? And I've looked on some state Facebook pages, and I do have the wonderful opportunity to be a member of the Virginia page. So I always comment about that because they have a Facebook page that they've invited me to be able to see. And they have many wonderful representations of stories, whether they just be in pictures or some verbiage beside them of things that their volunteers are doing. So I'm going to stop talking so that someone can raise their hand. I see a few things in chat. Gigi says they do videos. So anybody else want to share how you gather those stories of success? And how do you use those stories to encourage your volunteers? I know there's somebody out there that has
Me,
something.
me.
Okay, Josephine, we'll let you have a brief start because I know you have some wonderful stories. Take it away.
Well, good morning, everybody. It is still morning on my end over here, Deborah.
Right.
It's 11
Absolutely.
o'clock in the morning. Yes.
Hmm.
So one of the ways that I like to collect stories among, well, I'll back it up. I administrate a group for the Ethel Gathering groups, and I've got almost 500 women in my group. And the way I collect stories to encourage others is I gather pictures. We take pictures of all the get-togethers and the meetups and the hangouts and all of that. And recently, I put together a little video, and it was, all of the pictures, everything that has been shared to date. It's been a little over 9 months now, and I shared it on the page to remind everybody and also to share with the new people joining us of all the fun that we've been having, what it looks like, and to encourage other people to step up. Well, it's been a fun video and people have stepped up. So that's one way I'm doing it.
Thank you. And collecting the pictures is relatively easy, just taking your camera out and snapping. And many times putting the video can be as simple as putting it in a Google or in Microsoft, and many of them have ways to create videos and even on your phone. But I know Josephine put a little bit more time into it, but that's an excellent representation, and people like to see themselves. Dale, what are you doing in Maryland? So you're gonna mute so we can hear you first.
Right. I cover the southern counties of Maryland, which is more of the rural area. And my few volunteers that I enjoy seeing them now coming out of their comfort zone. I am a people person, so they see me walk around the room and interchange. And I said, come on, join me and listen to what the other seniors or who we're dealing with says. Just like yesterday for Veterans Day, we were at a Veterans Day parade, and one of my volunteers played Santa Claus, and he had a marvelous time. the kids were running around, the grandchildren. But for me, I think I enjoy seeing them come out of their comfort zone.
And that's a wonderful thing, because once they come out of that zone,
Yes,
it becomes their zone of comfort to,
it'll be
be.
their zone of comfort. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Lillian, what's going on in North Carolina?
Okay, for the region that I represent, at our monthly staff meetings, our associate director will have a PowerPoint and she will share pictures from all of our activities. The volunteer who's in charge of a particular activity has been tasked to take pictures, send them to the associate state director. So for each of the monthly meetings, we know what's going on. We can see pictures of the activities. If you were not a part of a particular program, then you can see what the other volunteers are doing in that area. So it's basically right now for all of our volunteers, we know what's going on with pictures through a PowerPoint presentation by our Associate State Director.
Thank you. And while we're waiting for any other comments, I want to go to the chat. And Rob in Kansas says that he only hears or shares success stories haphazardly and not aware of any intentional process so far. And that being said, I think it needs to be done intentionally and regularly. And I do agree. And this assumes that our goals are clearly stated and constantly reiterated. So thank you, Rob, for submitting that. And Antoine, I knew I could count on you out in California. Can we see your face today too?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, all right. Sometimes.
Oh, we could.
Okay, we
Now
could
we
hear
can.
you. Now it faded.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. It would help if I actually pulled the arm down on the microphone, but anyway, that's a different thing. We've done a lot of different things, and to echo what everybody has shared, and a lot of it is internal. Like our leadership team does a weekly report every week. We always have a volunteer section, so we have pictures, and that goes out to like the regional vice presidents, to the leadership throughout the entire association. And so we do a lot internally to make sure that the stories, whether volunteers or at leading an event or just like executing the event, we want to make sure that they're recognized and that they see the impact that they have made with that event on the ground. And we also utilize those stories when we do recruitment, because we will have volunteers, of course, like I think we shared about that before, but at the recruitment event, giving their own story about how they are involved. And that it usually does much more than what we share about, the process and position descriptions and all of that stuff, because it's directly from that volunteer's mouth. And so we've done that with like in-person recruitment events. We've done it when we've done recruitment where we actually like highlighted a story from a volunteer in a publication, whether it's the bulletin or online, wherever it is. We've also done things around heritage months, like Black History Month, Hispanic Heritage Month, where we'll highlight volunteers throughout the week with a video, and they talk about their experience, not only volunteering, but just being a representation of their community. So we usually look for those volunteers who have those experiences, whether they're unique or just kind of what we may think is common, but it really is something that is unique in somebody's eyes. So we try to do a lot of different things to recognize and use those stories.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure your volunteers are appreciative just to hear the stories, because that lets them know that you are seeing and appreciating what they're doing. But that intentionality of making sure that you recognize even those who are not on the forefront or on the front line, I'm sure that goes a long way as well. And sharing those volunteer stories during any kind of event, whether it be a large public event or a small internal event, all of that, I know for me as a volunteer, it makes me proud of my colleagues to see when they're recognized, and it makes me also very proud that the state and the staff are seeing those small and large contributions and just saying thank you. So I appreciate your contribution, Antoine. So going back to the chat, Rob says he's been recently assigned to Fraud Prevention Task Force, but he would suggest that the onboarding process for what a volunteer should know and how they should do is not robust, even as he asked for it. And so I think that's one of the continuing challenges that we have is we don't have one playbook for every state because every state onboards and orients their volunteers differently. But we do have some tools that can be used, such as the fast track, and I know the AARP way is being discussed and becoming more and more apparent, and it will be rolled out so people can use that as something that can be shared with volunteers. How do you get the success stories out to the volunteers on the ground rather than mainly staff? Anybody want to address that question? And while
It's me.
said that,
Josephine.
Josephine, do you have a response to that?
Well, hearing what everybody's been saying has really made me think about, the work that I've been doing with my group and going back to the beginning. And I think one of the ways that you can share directly with your volunteers those success stories is by actually and literally modeling what you expect, the type of behavior that you expect from your volunteers is to model it for them. And for instance, for myself, and it's not to toot my horn, but for one of our first gatherings, I made a pie and I was encouraged to then join and compete in a pie contest, right? And I was like, no, I'm not going to do that. Never thought about it, no interest. But when I left, I thought how hypocritical of me it would be for me to ask people to move outside of their comfort zone, get out there and do these things and enjoy them and feel comfortable. And the minute that I'm challenged to do something, I shy away. Well, I took my daughter with me, and it turned out to be really an amazing experience because I won a blue ribbon that day, and my daughter was there with me, and we shared that moment together. And it was a great reminder to her also to know the work that I'm doing as a volunteer, but for me to show her it's never too late to try different things and why we should continue to push ourselves and to encourage and to model that behavior for others. So that was my little share. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was, I'm sure, not only for your daughter, a wonderful reminder of, kind of practicing what you preach, but I'm sure it was also a pleasant surprise for you as well. And congratulations on that. That's big.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I put a couple of additional questions in the chat. Do you use or gather stories from new volunteers to help track progress? And the other question is, how do we make sure that a sense of community is in place for experienced and our new volunteers? Is there an intentional sharing of the stories that our current volunteers have with new volunteers to give them an idea of some of the wonderful things that are done, or some of the small behind the scenes things that are just as important as those front facing, public facing, big leadership roles? And while you're thinking, I'm just going to throw this out as well. I was in New Mexico recently, and we were talking about some of the roles of volunteers at any event. And one of the volunteers there suggested that washing tablecloths, which we all know we have our tablecloths and we know they need to be clean and we know that they need to be presentable for public, is something that she enjoyed doing. And that's a role that nobody sees. It's It's very, very behind the scenes. But you know that if somebody has the tablecloths and they don't bring them, you know that that's going to be missed. You know that if you have tablecloths and somebody inadvertently spills big grape juice on it, that's going to be noticed. So you have to have clean tablecloths. So I would agree that washing tablecloths, although that is a very invisible role that nobody sees, is as important as those roles that are appear on the Facebook feeds and on the social media feeds that we all are very proud of. So it is recognizing all of those things that volunteers do and that being part of the story. So I made it a point, and every time I can mention that tablecloth example as not only a role that volunteers do, but that was an important story because that volunteer may not want to be seen. She may not want to talk to people. Or like Mary, she may not want to table because that's not my ministry right now. But if that tablecloth was missing, it would be a tremendous impact on how we show up in our communities. So, Lillian, what you
Yes,
got?
you reminded me of something. I put in the chat Cupid Crew activity that we did in February, where we saying community. We had each volunteer to invite a community person to help with this activity, where we took roses to many assisted living facilities in our area. But as a part of that, when you said certain tasks, we had those who couldn't go to the facility, but they could actually cut the roses and organize them to be taken to the facility. So you're right, there are a lot of tasks that volunteers can do other than the main task. And also the carpooling, I'll drive, get a group of people together. But that was a very rewarding and eventful activity to take those roses to many facilities in our area. And we plan to do that next year. We're going to expand upon it. And we did have TV coverage so that the community could see one activity that AARP in the Triangle region was very involved in. And it was a total community effort. It wasn't just the AARP staff or the AARP volunteers, but we actually included community who were not members of AARP. So yes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And
Yeah.
how easy would it be to, for those who don't mind having their picture taken, that Cupid Crew prep team that are preparing the roses, just snap a picture of them. Whoever wants to have their picture taken, stay there, let me get a picture of that. And that could be part of that story that's built out wherever you put that story. So thank you. That's a great example. Anyone else? Let me see what's in the chat before I move on to Deborah.
Yeah, while people are thinking, Rob did ask another part to his question, and I think there's probably somebody that can answer this for him. It was, how do you get the success stories out to the volunteers on the ground rather than keeping it totally within staff? We know, staff have KPIs. They have things that they need to do to be able to prove that they have accomplished what is necessary. But there are success stories that need to be shared with volunteers. How do you do that? How do you get that information out? Can we help Rob with that question?
Pick me. Oh my gosh.
I thought it would be Josephine because I saw the little green line coming. Come on, Josephine. See if we can help.
I love working in the community, and I love working with people and involving people in it and making them feel empowered to take on a volunteer role in the capacity that they feel comfortable taking on, whatever that role might be. And I think one of the main things is for us not to ever forget that we need to be constantly thanking our volunteers and celebrating our successes. And I think that's a wonderful way to continuously share with your volunteers who are getting a lot of the work done for you and let them know how much they appreciate it. So like Dr. Clark said earlier, take a picture real quick, when you're having a meeting, when you're discussing something, when you're gathering, when you're having some coffee, whatever. Share those success stories all the time. Celebrate every step of the way because it motivates people. People get energized, and then you gain momentum in the work and you gain real engagement and ownership of the work. And you can step back a little, let go, and let others.
All right.
That's great, Josephine. Thank you so much. Joe.
I've got a couple of examples to share. I'm relatively new to Wisconsin, but I was very active in Arizona, so I have to refer back to that time. In terms of recognizing volunteers and their activities, one of the things that we did, staff put together a monthly e-volunteer newsletter that was sent out to all of our volunteers. And in there, we tried to highlight different activities, both with pictures and stories and what the outcomes were that our volunteers had done during the previous month. And then on an annual basis, we always had a volunteer appreciation event. And we had quite a good attendance with those. And at that event, then we recognized our volunteers, thanked them for what they did, and gave them that kind of an important pat on the back in front of their peers. One of the other things that someone had talked about was the new and the experienced volunteer. One of the things that I've always enjoyed doing was setting up a buddy system so that for whatever event it might be, the new volunteer has a buddy, and that might be the volunteer who's more senior and maybe in charge of that activity, or maybe someone that we tell the new volunteer, okay, we can't be there with you, but if you've got any questions that come up while this activity is taking place, call me. And then after the event, always to check back with that new volunteer to see how they did, what could have helped them to be better and be better prepared for what they were doing. So just a couple of ideas that have worked in the past.
Thank you. Those are great ideas.
Mhm.
It looks like Gigi says tongue twister there. I share success stories and email with pictures after each and every activity or event to the full volunteer team, not just to those who volunteered or showed up, which is great. And I also highlight success stories at in-person and virtual meetings. So wonderful ways to share that with all the volunteers. And Lillian said that success stories that resonate with volunteers can assist in their wanting to do more as a volunteer, or may give them an idea of a story to share that they thought may not have been interesting enough. So yes, I agree. Thank you both for sharing that. I know Tara wants to contribute, but her hand isn't working. So Tara,
Thank you. Thanks, Mary. So I learned something from a colleague back in the state office that I thought was really good, and she brought it over from some work that she was doing when she was with the Hands On Network, and it's that she would often she would each month and at periodic times throughout the year, not just at year end, do a snapshot of the accomplishments of the team. So she would kind of tally everything up, and she'd provide that to everybody at their meeting. But if you're virtual, that's something that could be really easily shared on screen. And just showing like kind of that roll up of everybody's contributions together, and the opportunity to celebrate those successes and the impact of many hands being involved in that process. And then that also gives the opportunity to spotlight maybe anything that's new, or if it was an idea that someone had that the team decided to work on together, to really call those folks out, especially if they're people who wouldn't normally, acknowledge themselves in it, that you can ask about how that went. We had this kind of example yesterday within our team that we had some great luck working with a couple groups we had not worked with before. And so we just took a brief pause to celebrate that and acknowledge that, that was something new for us, even though the work was similar to work we were doing before. We were doing it with new people.
thank you, Tara.
Yeah, and Tara and Mary, Antoine put something in the chat related to, I think, Rob's initial question as well. In terms of what they're doing in California, and Antoine, you can correct if I misstate here, but it says that you're sharing at team meetings, you're using the volunteer portal, which would be the chatter groups that are available, and any other platform that you're using for and by volunteers. So using and making entries on the chatter groups for your various state teams is something anybody can do. It doesn't have to be a staff person. It doesn't have to be someone who's the lead volunteer. Anyone can post to those portal groups and get that information out or ask questions. And so, Antoine, thank you for sharing that part with us. Mary, I think you put one more question in. Do you want to go with that?
I just find it.
It's about the suggestion.
Yes. Please provide a suggestion on how a story about success could be used to deepen our volunteer engagement. And I think some of those have kind of been woven into some of the responses already, but if anyone has anything else to say about that, deepening the volunteer engagement, how these stories may contribute. And I know at Andrus Award ceremonies, I know those include community members and volunteers as well, but I think that's an example of the ultra deepening of how those stories are shared, because some of those stories have me so emotional that I'm just a wreck hearing them because they're so over the top. But we have stories that are not award-winning stories that are still award-winning stories that can help to deepen those volunteer engagements. Antoine, I see your hand.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm going to cheat a little bit because we kind of borrowed this from the Connecticut State Office. Just an example of how there's no need to recreate the wheel if it's already running and greased really well and operating functionally. So we kind of deepen engagements. We have a volunteer referral program where if a volunteer refers another volunteer and that new person is active for 3 months, then the volunteer who made the referral gets a gift card, $25. And then if that new volunteer is active for a year, they get 50. And so that's as a result too of some support we got from OBE. But it's just a way for us to recognize something that is critical to volunteer recruitment, which is word of mouth. The best recruitment tool there is. I mean, we have eBlast, we have blogs, we have platforms, but word of mouth is stronger because I'll just speak from what I've seen is that the folks who come through somebody else referrals stays connected longer, and they're more consistent. So we kind of use that as a way to poach from the Connecticut State Office and use this program that, and now I'm gonna blank on her name because she just retired not too long ago, but it almost came back to me. The ASD that was in Connecticut, or program assistant that was their specialist, Elaine Warner.
You got it.
Yeah, got that from her.
Well, Connecticut does have some programs that I can guarantee you, Antoine, you're not the only one poaching, as you said. I'll just use it and say, thank you, Connecticut, because they have some wonderful ideas, as all states do. So thanks for sharing that. Lillian?
Yes, in our state communications director will share stories. He will record volunteers and he will have them to talk about caregiving or any of the major topics that AARP is covering. And so our volunteers have an opportunity to share their stories. We put it on our Facebook page. We've put it some on the X page. And so that is one way that our volunteers have an opportunity to share their stories. We've done the scams, we've done caregiving, and we haven't reached out to Social Security yet, but that's one of the ones we want to do. So they're telling their personal stories and the community is able to hear them through those mediums.
Thank you. And those do make a big difference. Thank you so much. Josephine?
I wanted to share that I recently traveled with Dr. Clark to New Mexico, and I participated and attended my very first Andrus Awards ceremony. And what the director did was very moving to me because another way that he celebrated his volunteers was that he not only announced the winners, he took pause between each one to also mention briefly other folks who had really gone above and beyond and probably should have won. And so rather than just not mentioning them at all, which I've seen happen in many different events, I thought it was a wonderful way for him to say, these folks didn't win, but they merit mention because they did XYZ. And that was another way for them to be recognized in front of all the volunteers who attended that ceremony. And it was very, very moving. It was very nice.
It was very touching, very touching. I was an emotional mess after that, in a good way, but it was a great event. And Joseph, the state director, did a phenomenal job at not only acknowledging everyone in the room, including Josephine and I, but you could feel that those volunteers felt appreciated even outside of that event. They were just joyful, joyful volunteers. So thanks for sharing that, Josephine. Deborah?
Well, yes, ma'am. And I think that this is probably, or in what Antoine said, is probably a good lead in again to some of our other questions that people are asking. And one of the things that when I thought about this success stories, I'm thinking not just, I'm not the visual person. I don't think about the pictures. That's not my first thing. I think about the words. And what I find that is missed sometimes, and I'm sure there are some people here who've probably done this, but where is that 25 word or less explanation of what they did? It's that elevator speech that where a volunteer can say, this is what I accomplished. And I think maybe Lillian, you folks were kind of getting to that point by talking about the particular areas of service for AARP, but we've somehow got to encourage people and help them to write that story that's very brief, that isn't produced in that way, but is shared. Because as we're talking, what Joe was talking about, a buddy system, to encourage people to continue to serve, having that buddy system and someone talking to them in a positive way is probably very supportive and gets them down the next step. So, Miss Lillian, I see.
Well, yeah, I was just going to add to, we talked about elevator speech. When we had our AARP University early this year, we had all lead volunteers, and the state office actually hired someone to come in and talk about elevator speeches. And then the volunteers had the opportunity to practice. He had his video camera set up, and each volunteer was asked to go before the video. He would ask the leading questions, and they would practice giving elevator speeches. So we've touched on a little bit of that with the elevator speech by having someone to come in and work with volunteers on how to project and how to share their story.
I think that's a great thing. It's just another way to do it. And we're coming upon a time period for this organization, and we've been in a change period for some time. Staff are changing, volunteers are changing, and I think we need to get those stories out there. I put some information in the chat, and then I'll get back to the questions. One was related to a document that's available. If you've got an AARP.org email, you can likely get to the infonet for AARP. And there is something, and I was just going to show this quickly if I can get it up here. Because it's always nice if you can share a screen when you can figure out how to do it.
And while you're doing that, I'm just going to say what Gigi said in
Okay,
the
go right
chat
ahead. Mhm.
about at in-person meetings, have leadership and issue experts say thank you and how volunteers made a difference in the work that they were doing. And so that also goes a long way in making volunteers know that, yes, you were seen.
Okay, I've got it up here now. And there is an 8-minute video. If you go into InfoNet and just put in the word story spine, these kinds of documents that have been created by the Office of Community Engagement will come up. And there are 8-minute videos to go along with these that will talk to you, help us understand how to elevate our communications with storytelling. And this is the 9-page guide that actually shows the slides from the video and what they're saying for each of those pieces.
That's
Three
great.
sets of, can you see this?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the 3 sets of questions, because you're always trying to figure out what's the audience, what's your message, and what you want the audience to do with the information you give them. And I was just so glad that this information is out here and available to us as volunteers, as well as to staff. It is on the infonet. So I'm going to
Thank you.
stop sharing that, because see if I'm going to try to stop sharing, because you don't really want to see my screen forever. Gosh. Oh, here we go again.
I can stop it.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
Because this could have been going on forever. Okay. So when we're talking about sharing information and sharing our stories, sometimes we've got volunteers who are working with more than one volunteer or more than one staff person. So the question keeps coming up: how do we ensure that all volunteers are going to receive the same encouraging message about operational success? Is there a practice that any one of you can share that might help when a volunteer's got to relate to more than one staff member or more than one volunteer? What do you do? How do you make sure? I see people smiling, but you can come on, just come off mute and share what you're thinking. Because otherwise I'll start talking and you don't want to hear that.
Uh-oh.
Jump in again. Me.
Wait. I saw Gwen unmute first.
Yes.
That's great.
Come on, Gwen.
Okay, so as Mary and Josephine know, I say what I think, and I don't say it to be mean or nasty, because I care about everybody and I do for everybody. But we have to say, okay, how we feel. And I just recently, Tara's here in a chat here with Tara and Josephine, made a comment about we're working on Hub Dialer, and I wrote the script and I'm supposedly the lead of it. It's not a big deal to me, people. So the thing is that I used the word, excuse me, and it really came from, it's never a word I've used in this description, but I said, we make the phone calls and then it gets passed on to someone else. We don't know what happens. There's no flow.
Mhm.
And it's like we're garbage. I used that word. And it's been haunting me since. It reminded me of when I worked with Marriott and Hyatt. And at the time, almost everyone who was employed in those two hotels thought that the telephone operators were the lowest of all the staff workers, where people outside of the business thought it was housekeepers. And so it was really weird. And so we have to look at how the people feel what they're doing. What they're doing, is it as important? Where does it flow? Where does it go? Give them the tools to understand what their part is instead of just doing one particular little thing. And that's what I'm thinking. And I probably didn't express it well, but Mary called me out. So there you got it, Mary. You can rephrase that for me, please.
You said it splendidly and genuinely. And so no, I'm not taking a word out, and I'm just going to say thank you for your contribution.
Yeah. And there are people on this call clearly who are listening and understanding what you're saying. Gigi just put into the chat that she believes it's important for a staff person to know that, because that can be changed. And we've got to be comfortable in speaking up to not just staff, but also to other volunteers, because we're in this for the success of the work, which also is a success for us. Miss Gwen, one more comment?
Sorry, I'd like to
No,
add
go
to
on.
that we need to, those that we work with, fellow volunteers, not just be open with the management or the staff people we're working with, but with our fellow volunteers. And even in our group, like we have members, we have Ethels, and we have lunches or whatever together. We need to let them know they can speak up. It's important that we all are heard.
Right.
Thank you. So I know we're close to time, but I saw Romel is off. Romel, did you have something to say? Because I know you came off Zoom, or did you just want to wave at us?
No, I'm just glad to be here. It's my first time or second time sitting in on this call. And I just was amazing to hear all the great stuff that's being shared. And you know, me saying, okay, we're not doing so bad because we're doing that. Okay, we're doing that. We've done that. And the hub dollar comment was really quite important to me, because, you know, our hub dollars in Georgia, I mean, like, they are premier in everybody's eyes because they always meet their goals. And one of the things with the new director that I said to her is, these hub dialers are consistent. They're always there. They meet their goals every time, and they need to hear from you. And I want you, well, before we started the campaign in October, I asked the new director, who'd only been there 8 weeks, to put together a Zoom call at 9:30 before they started their work that day, to let them know how important they are, and the promise to keep them informed on to how it went that day, what were the issues that day, and how well they're doing, so that they're encouraged every day. And they did it. And I was so thankful for that. And so were the hub dollars.
Thank you. And drive carefully, okay?
Oh yeah. I'm just I'm on hands-free here, and I'm just listening.
Okay.
And I'm being very careful. Thank you. But I had a doctor's appointment, and I didn't want to miss this one for this time. So
well, we're glad you didn't. And thank you very much. And Antoine put something in the chat again. Would you like to just say the end of, or say what you put in there, Antoine? And then we'll close on that.
Okay, I was just saying that the example of what Gwen shared, and how Gigi encouraged her to talk to you know, to address it and not just let it go. I think that's what can keep folks wanting to stay committed to AARP, because I know I'll speak for California. We hear volunteers, and we try to make alterations or suggestions that they put out there come to fruition. But at the very least, we're going to communicate why or why not, right? So so that it isn't just I just threw something out there and nobody heard me. Trying to get back to people and let them know how things may or may not be progressing. It's important because ultimately, like you all said, it's really, we want people to, I will speak for myself. I would love for volunteers to connect to the work of AARP and not necessarily to the person. Because the reality is, something I might go to a different state office tomorrow, might leave the organization, but if you're connected to the work, then you'll stay and you'll continue and you'll
Yes,
push forward.
yes.
Right. So that's all.
All right. Well, thank you, Antoine. And thank you, Dr. Clark, for helping as normal to co-lead this session. Appreciate all of the comments. We've got the recording, we've got the chat log. We'll put all of that into the portal on our chat group. Okay. And where Antoine was talking about materials from Connecticut and ideas from other states, a lot of those are still listed in our portal chatter group. So you can get copies of that. And if you can't find it, write to me, dturner@aarp.org. I won't throw Dr. Mary out there, but you can write to me and we'll find what you need. So thank you very much. Our next meeting for the year will be December 10th. And it's going to be evaluating, as was the official title, evaluating volunteer-led activities for this year. But what it's going to be is a surprise, okay? Because we're going to have people talk about some of the things that have gone on that we've heard, and now what happened with that. So I think it should be very exciting. Dr. Mary?
To say something and she couldn't raise her hand. So I know we're 4 minutes over. We never do this, but Tara,
Right.
come on and say what you needed to say.
Oh, thank you, Mary. I appreciate it. Thanks everybody for sticking with us. And this is a nice follow-up to what Antoine was talking about. And it's that we are revamping the volunteer opinion survey, and there are going to be some questions asked periodically, either throughout the year or in that survey, about how volunteers like to be recognized. And so if you're a volunteer on the call, please remember that when we ask questions like that, we really want to know. And if you don't want tchotchkes as a way to be recognized, just write it on a Post-it right now while it's fresh on your mind and save it up for that volunteer opinion survey. And if you're a volunteer or a staff member who hears others speaking their love language and you know how you can recognize them, whisper that to the staff member or to a volunteer leader and help each other make sure that people are getting thanked in the way that is important to them. Because we don't all take just a thank you is wonderful, and some other people like to be recognized. We all know this, but it's helpful when you have other people helping to be the little elves to whisper in your ear. So that's all. And thanks, Antoine, for those lovely parting remarks. So thanks for letting me have a few more moments.
All right. Well, thank you all very much. We have reached the end of our time today. I hope that you enjoyed the rest of your week, and happy Thanksgiving to those who will be celebrating. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Deborah, stop recording.
Yes, ma'am.